Good evening. My name is Luc Sala. Tonight we talk with Mike Robinson, spiritual teacher, healer, a man who brings us in contact with ourselves and the world within. There are teachers for the outside and there are teachers for the inside. Mike sees himself as a teacher for the inside. Welcome, Mike.
You're welcome, thank you.
When we talk about spiritual teachers, most of them have a tradition.
Right.
But you don't. You made your own, so to speak.
Yes, in a sense, I think that if you belong to something, it's like having a belief system. And the belief system can limit you. So if you are purely Buddhist, then you have a Buddhist understanding. If you are Christian, you have a Christian understanding. But there is a way of sitting in the middle where you don't necessarily belong to any of what we would call mainstream philosophies or teachings. And yet you still are free and you have an inner understanding, an inner joy, which is spiritual, not religious.
Mm-hmm. But still in your tapes and brochures, I have a feeling that you borrow a little bit, say, from Christianity, and that the idea of a Christ comes true in your...
I think that often the word, the love of God, has been interpreted to mean the word Christ or Christos. In Eastern philosophy, we would say the Buddha. In Indian Hindu philosophy, we would refer to Krishna. We are referring still to an embodiment of love that came into physical manifestation. And I think that each one of those teachers was showing us how to connect with what was within us. And so all we can do now is to reconnect if we've become disconnected.
But you basically say reconnect with ourselves.
With your inner self, because the inner self is the God self. And what we've done throughout our many lives is disconnected from our real self. Very few people know who they really are. Mm-hmm. And so the inner quest, to know thyself, to thyself be true, becomes a real major statement at this particular time.
But you said that we are also our previous incarnation, which means that you come from an idea that there is reincarnation, that we have past lives.
Yes. And basically what happens is that if we go way back in time and we go back to the beginning, what did we come here for? It's always everybody's big question, what am I doing here? We must have had a reason for coming onto the earth, and that reason was that we had to love. And so what's gone wrong? Well, obviously we're not loving. And because we're not loving, we then have crisis in our lives. So at some point, in some way, we have to get back to a state of loving, a state of giving, a state of compassion.
Some people feel that the end of the millennium, that our days now are kind of critical, that it's now the time to change, and especially that some things that happened in the recent past, like Princess Diana's death, Mother Teresa died. There's a few major things that happened, and people are kind of warning.
Yes. Well, I think in a sense, I would say that they inaugurated the New Age, that literally the New Age started perhaps shortly after the death of Diane and the death of Mother Teresa, because these people have opened people's hearts. In England, which is usually very closed off emotionally, suddenly people are grieving openly. They are able to share emotion. Now, we call the earth the planet of emotions. And that means that while we are here in incarnation, everything we experience is on an emotional level. Mm-hmm. And so we've really come down to experience emotion. So we find positive emotion, which is love, joy, happiness. We find negative emotion, which is fear, which is anger, which is jealousy, which is desire, which is pride, as the stuck ego. Mm-hmm. And if these are the negative emotions, then the positive emotions can outweigh them. They can demolish negative emotion.
Now, during the grief of England and the whole world, maybe about Princess Diana, which was to me a little bit out of proportion, suddenly there was this outburst of emotions, and people like the Queen that we never saw do anything really emotional, openly expressed her feelings. Now, you have a talent, you can see people's emotions.
Right.
You can actually, how do you see that, as colors?
Well, to me I see them as colour. If I was looking at somebody and it was in front of me, on my right hand side is the colour yellow, and yellow denotes fear. And so quite often in our society we talk of someone as a coward as being yellow. We say they're yellow belly, and actually the yellow forms just outside the physical body in the aura. To the other side we have red, which is anger, and we say people are red with anger, not only in their face but in the aura as well. We have green for envy. So people who are very jealous, you see a lot of green in the aura. This is only in relation to the emotional body. Green elsewhere has a different significance. And we tend to see desire as being excessive oranges in the aura. And pride is a mixture of a little bit of fear, a bit of anger, a bit of jealousy, a bit of desire. And we present pride to the world. Our pride is our ego. And so we say to the world, rather than showing who I really am, what is within me, I present this image. And we spend all of our lives trying to prop this image up, to try and stop people seeing who we really are, seeing who is within us.
Now, going back to that moment of emotion,
Right.
The burial of the funeral of Princess Diana.
Yes.
People were emotional. You were in England at the time?
Yes.
Did you feel that? Could you see that?
I could feel it and I could see it. And what I saw was people, their heart chakras were opening. And as they opened, internally their grief came out. Not only the grief because of Diana and what she represented, but it was personal grief that they'd been holding on to, not just in this life, but in many, many lives. And so they were able to open up and release it. And it was quite interesting to see the newspaper reports where some people were saying it's wrong for people to grieve openly. They were trying to put everybody back into their boxes. Mm-hmm. But it won't happen. The new age has begun now. So now, once we've opened up, let's keep it open. Let's become expressive. Let's not hide behind what the English call the stiff upper lip anymore. Mm-hmm. And we all do that. We hide behind our egos and our prides. Mm-hmm. We're frightened to say what we really feel.
Are you implying that the death of Diana or other major tragedies there give people an excuse to open up?
Well, I think in her particular case, because of the compassion she showed, it just naturally opened people up, that they couldn't stop opening up. It was inevitable. I think it was all pre-planned, whether we like to feel that or not. It's nice to think, oh, it's an accident, it wasn't meant to happen. But on another level, I believe that this was meant to happen. And I think the time was exactly right at this moment. That right at this moment, people have opened. And now they're opened, it's allowed an outpouring of grief, and with the grief comes a lot of past memories. And so people are thinking back to their past, and in thinking back and looking at their past, they're able to heal it. And so the healing is still going on now. We're still in a position where we can change.
Because that's an important question. If you believe in reincarnation, in karma, on that level, that past life haunt us or help us or anywhere are in us, you have to believe that there's a certain amount of choice, that you have to do something in this life that would alter the wheel of karma, as they say.
Yes.
But there's the opposite view that says, everything has to be what it is.
Right.
The more deterministic view.
I think what it is we've come here and we have lessons to learn. And we can either learn the lesson right now, or we can spend a week, a month, a year, 3 years, 3 lifetimes learning that lesson. And really, at some point, if we actually stop seeking and just stand still for a moment, we begin to see the lesson. And it's easy to see our lessons by looking at the emotion that governs our actions. Mm-hmm. If we have a desire for wealth, and say our karma is that we should be poor, and we have to experience poverty in this lifetime, then it doesn't matter what we do. If we achieve that wealth, we are often having to achieve it through negative aims. So it may be through crime, it could be through drugs, it could be some form of drawing that wealth towards us, which is negative. And so therefore we suffer through that. We have our freedom taken away. Let's say somebody goes to prison. If they were to accept their karma, okay, I'm accepting poverty in this lifetime, try to understand what poverty means. Once you accept something, it's no longer a blockage. You've taken it inside you. Once you've taken it inside, you can then transmute that.
Yeah, but many people listening to you say, that's easy, Mike. You tell us that to accept the situation, whatever. But I'm in jail. I'm in handicap. My family had an accident last week or whatever. That's easy talk.
No.
For me, life is hard. I've been on the wrong side of everything. When they handed out the money, I wasn't there. When they handed out the gifts, the talents, I wasn't there. How can I come to grips with my situation?
Okay, well, if we turn around and say, let's say we're in a position we've done something wrong and we're in prison. Now we have to ask ourselves, what did we do wrong? Not just what did we do wrong, but why did we do it? Was it because we didn't have the courage to go out and study at college? Did we feel unworthy? Did we think that we would never be able to, become a painter and decorator, become, a cleaner, become an artist, become a musician? Is there something inside us?
Even in my life, I would point to say, but I am what I am because, my parents were like that, and the situation at school, and that teacher, whatever. But who am I to have the authority over my life to have said, I don't want to be in jail, I don't want to be in this program?
We could do that, because what happens, what you inherited from your parents, your DNA in example, is you were meant to have that in you. You were meant to have their strengths and weaknesses, but you don't have to stay in them. So you can't blame your parents. They only gave you what you needed for this lifetime's experience. So what you do now is you say, okay, I've had enough of having all this anger that my father had. I've had enough of all this passivity, this extreme fear that my mother had. I'm now going to work on this. I'm going to balance it. And so what you do is you start to change, and you realize that you are not your mother or your father. You are an individual.
Mike, if we talk about that individual's choice to be who you want to be, what about the world?
Right.
Peace.
Right.
Take a subject, you know, it's, I can work on my inner peace, but what about the war out there, the poverty, well, there's some problems out there.
Okay, I think what you said first was the idea of working on your inner peace first. That idea that you take the beam from your own eye before you take the splinter from someone else's is a very important statement, because we have to work on self. If we have inner peace, then that inner peace radiates to people around us. If they're affected by that inner peace, they also are touched by it. They find that peace within themselves. And so what we have in the world at the moment is what we call a silent revolution. That there are a lot of people who are working for peace in the backgrounds, working for peace within themselves, and they begin to change the vibration of the earth. Mm-hmm. It's the only way forwards, because you can't sometimes stop two people fighting. I said in my own two children that they are very loving children, and yet they have a row. And at the moment of having the row, they can't solve their differences. They never hit each other, but you almost feel that a little bit further they would hit each other. Mm-hmm. So we all have that tendency within us. But if we can create a greater peace within, then that peace will reflect in the world that is around us.
Now, in my particular mind, which I only assume is like that of others, I find that there is peace, but there is also a raging war at times. I mean,
Right.
there's anger, there's feelings, all kinds of things happen, and so I feel that there's something going on.
Right.
Now, it's very nice to say peace, and if I sit still and I would be on a mountain all day, I would probably think
Right.
about peace a lot, but now my life takes over from me. Now,
Right.
can I change that, and how
Right,
do I
okay,
change
yeah,
it?
you do, because two things. If the earth is a planet of emotions, as we described it, then it's okay to feel anger. But if you try to understand anger, anger is, in the spiritual sense, twice times fear. I'll give you an example. You go into a shop and you go to buy something, and you walk in and someone's rude to you, and you don't say anything to them, and so you hold on to that. And you walk into the next shop and someone's rude to you there, and if you don't say anything then you are holding on to that as well. The next person you bump into is going to get your rage, your anger. So if you were assertive and you said what you felt the moment you felt it, you would have no anger. You would deal with things the second they come to you. And that's our issue, is we don't deal with things when they come to us to experience. We put them off, we save them till later.
Yeah, but isn't that what society forces us to? We are civilized people, so to speak, so
Right.
we don't shout at policemen, and we are nice in traffic.
Yeah.
All those idiots driving past, but, you know, we behave.
But what you do is you start in as many times as possible. You catch yourself when you realize that you're not actually expressing your feelings. You start to express them. And the second you do that, and if you start to, those words, be true to yourself, be really honest with yourself. It's like looking at the guy who perhaps, is starving. Let's say he's starving and he has to go out and steal. Now, he's stealing because he can't feed his family. Is he doing wrong in the eyes of society? Yes. But is he doing wrong on a soul level? Maybe not. So he isn't incurring karma. But what that personality could do is go out and perhaps train at something at college. He could perhaps do something. Now, I'm saying this because I've had to do that. If people talk to me about squalor, I've been there. They talk to me about being lost and in the middle of a pit. I was lost and in the middle of a pit. But somehow I came out of it. And I believe that we all have the ability within us to come out of that pit. We put ourselves in it, we can get ourselves out of it. And what we do is we become conscious of what's causing us to do that. Are we too meek? Are we too mild? I've seen a lot of people, great people, who are so peaceful and loving, in a sense so fearful to express who they really are, that they end up with liver cirrhosis, they end up with liver damage. They may not have never drunk alcohol in their lives, but because they never express their feelings, they bottle it up and then the liver becomes damaged. I see people with weak kidneys because the fear just consumes the kidney. Our emotion governs the physical body. So if we are physically ill, then we are emotionally ill. So to get back to what do we do to change our lives, we start to look at why we do things. Ask ourselves, if we get angry, well, why are we getting angry? Is it because we are not able to express ourselves? Are we not able to say what we feel when we feel it? Are we unable to present our personality to the world. And if we are, then there's an ego in front of us, which is what we want the world to see. But the real us is what we would like them to see, but we're frightened to show to the world. It's the bit that needs to be confronted. We've got to get down this pride, this ego. That emotional outpouring in throughout the world at the death of Princess Diana was literally that the ego dropped. It was like one of the bricks came out and so the building tumbled. Everybody's pride went, and so they could cry openly in the streets. The pride was all finished. We can do that all the time, but we've got to really want to do it. No one can do it for us. A God's not going to come from the sky and take it all away. But the way we do it is by learning to understand self. And the self that we're talking about is this inner self. And if you can get to know your inner self, the real self, then you know the universe and the gods. And that's the true statement. And everybody has the potential to do what I do, to see what I see. We've all got it, but it takes effort. You can't just give up, 20 yards down the path. It's worth persevering.
The way you talk about it, it feels like, okay, we're all angry, we're all grieving, we all have emotions.
Yes.
And if we don't have them, we should have them because maybe they're too suppressed, but we have them. If we could look at them as emotions and not as the driving force to go and hit someone or make more.
Yeah, and feel it. The words feel the fear and do it anyway. That word feel is exactly right. If I see fear in the aura, behind people's fear walls, I can often see what they're frightened of. You can see images of spiders and aeroplanes, water. All of our fear issues are hidden behind emotion. And to hide it, we have to block our solar plexus off. And so we do things like we have cravings, we eat certain foods to block this wheel that spins that should bring us feeling. We stop its feeling, and so we put on weight. We bulk ourselves out because we don't want to experience things. It's quite strange what people hold on to in their aura. And if we could just let go and allow the feeling to come to us, that's what it's all about. That's the key, is experience it. We're perfect as we are. All we have to do is learn to accept everything. And once you start to accept it, it goes through your system and it moves out of you. We're frightened now, karma, because we have a fear perhaps of being mugged. We think if we walk down the streets, we're going to be mugged. It's probably not going to happen. And if it was going to happen, there would be an inner feeling which would warn us. It would be a feeling that we have, but people don't listen to their feelings anymore. They don't listen to that intuition.
A lot of the statements you make, for me, come from someone who says, yeah, but I'm okay, I'm happy and I'm perfect, as you say. Again, most people out there, I doubt myself. I said, hey, am I perfect? Probably not. Sometimes I feel okay. It seems an easy attitude, an easy stance from someone who has been there, but for us, the footfolk out there...
So where do you start? Two things. You learn to listen and trust the intuition. You learn to listen and trust the inner feelings, we now call it the gut feeling. All of us have intuition. They have inner feelings. And we could have an inner feeling to, let's say, make a phone call. And you go and make your phone call the second you get your feeling. And when you do, the person at the other end says, oh, glad you rang. I needed someone to talk to. Or it could be, normally when you ring that person, you're on the phone for hours. But you just ring them at that moment, you get the feeling, and they're just going out. And so you're only on the phone for 5 minutes. If we trust our inner feelings, if we constantly act on the intuition, the second it comes to us, that's how we solve our problems. The problem is that what we do is we put things off. Oh, I'll ring later. Or I'll deal with this one later. Now, we're not only just putting off thoughts, but that's energy. And so it demands energy to hold something in abeyance. And so we become stressed because we're holding all these things that we can't manage. And to hold them demands our strength, our energy. So if we release them, our energy grows, our inner strength grows. We become more confident, more conscious. And all of us can do that. The description I would describe, it's like trying to hold beach balls underwater and to hold them down. And suddenly we've got no more legs or hands to hold them under. So we've got to let go of them. And as you let go, they rise to the surface. And then we can deal with them. Our issue is we've been holding on to things for too long, for lifetimes. It's programmed into us through religion, through politics. It's like taking away our free will, not giving us free will. But to get your free will back, you have to listen and act on your feelings the second you get the feeling.
For someone who, like you from early age on, saw colors around people, energy levels, vibrations, if you go around the world, you must see, after some concentration probably, what people hide, how they are.
Yes.
and still you have this positive feeling. Does that mean that you have looked at many people and thought they were not so bad after all, or on general?
No one is bad, are they? It's our interpretation of what bad is. But we've got to accept ourselves as we are. If we are God incarnate, which we are.
Oh, that's a theory, but
Yeah.
you are one of the people who can actually see
Yes, and I
what
see
their
that.
intentions are.
Yes.
So what are they?
Yeah, well, first thing we have to say is, first we have to deal with what we are holding back. We have to deal with all those issues that we are choosing not to face. And so there's no quick fix on the spiritual path, so to speak. The New Age seems to offer us quick fix. They have things like, they call it ascension. They have things which, quick fix enlightenment. You go on a weekend workshop and you're enlightened. It doesn't work like
There's
that.
many. Aren't they mantra here and breath pattern
But
there?
anyone who's been on the path will know that it doesn't work like that it takes time and it takes lifetimes. But you can do a lot in one lifetime, provided you're conscious of what it is you are doing. You have to listen to that inner feeling and start to act, start to take action. Nothing is going to happen without action. And the second you take action, there is change.
There's a lot of Buddhism in what you say, right action.
But I don't really study Buddhism. I've read very little, but I can understand that Buddhism was very much into the mind and trying to understand the mind. And so what I have to do is understand the mind and the spirit. Then there's going to be similarities. But the body is important because in a lot of spiritual practice, they deny the body. I see a lot of souls who have come back in this lifetime, who've had lives perhaps in India, in past lives, and they spent a life in an ashram, denying the physical. Mm-hmm. And they come back in this lifetime, and they have to honour the physical. And they hate it. They've got sexual hang-ups. The amount of sexual hang-ups that are in Western society, coming from religious backgrounds. And now we have to get down there and love our sexual habits. We've got to get back down there and express love through them rather than this emotional blockage that we're all experiencing.
Oh, I don't know. Sexual deviations keep us busy, at least,
Well, yeah,
bored.
but to a lot of people, that they bring immense suffering as well. Mm-hmm. And if we're here to release suffering, then we have to go into things, not avoid them. It's like everything in life. It doesn't matter what you've got, whether it's a headache, whether it's an ache, whether it's a sexual problem. You have to look at it. You've got to accept it. And the second you start accepting it, you start dissolving it. Our problem is we don't accept. We don't want it. We don't want the pain, so we take an aspirin to get rid of it. We don't want a sexual problem, so we go and see a doctor, a psychiatrist. It's how can I get out of this problem, not how can I get into it.
That's an important thing. Now, one of your ways of doing that is you use Eastern methods like Qigong or Tai Chi, which are basically body movements, energy flow patterns, that you use and teach to people to
Yes, I tend to use
these
because it makes people look at their bodies again. It makes people become conscious of their energy system. And thinking of the aura being all the way around us, in any movement where you move your arm, let's say there's my fear here, when my arm goes through my fear, it helps to break it up and dissolve it. When my arm comes back, it brings my fear into me. So it's a way of working on yourself emotionally. Most people
That's
do.
Interesting. So, say that the standard Tai Chi movements, the bases, the sword movements, the sword figure, if you see them with enough concentration, you can see the colors, you see that they are harmonious?
Yes, and I can see whether they work specifically on fear. Some work a lot on anger. When you talk to people who do things like Tai Chi, and they say, I was really angry and I started Tai Chi, calm myself down. Other people are very fearful, and it works on their fear. And it's all of this because when you move, you are moving energy. Not just the physical body and the muscles, but external energy as well as internal. And so most of these systems are very balancing. And it works with yoga as well. It doesn't work so well with aerobic exercises, because with a lot of aerobic exercise, you stress organs, because you're throwing your arms around. And when you throw your arm, you throw energy as well. And you can drain the physical body. And although you may look fit and muscular, internally you've got no energy, there's no chi.
No, you must watch television sometimes. These days we have these awful sales channels, commercial channels that tell you that this abdomen plus or blah, 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 whatever, and some good-looking guy comes and tells us that this is really the one that takes all our muscle groups and this and that, one device, 15 muscle groups, eternal life and everything. When you look at it, is there any truth to it?
Not really, no, because sometimes, it's difficult. You can't judge them because, you see, in life, sometimes we devote ourselves to the physical body. Particularly, let's say, someone who denied it in a past life comes back and they so adore the body that they think everything is body. But it may just be their karma to experience that in this lifetime. Someone else is into the mind, so you get great philosophers and intellects who want everything on an intellectual level. And you get others who are into the spirit. But the skill is, how do you unify all those? How can you get mind, body and spirit as one? That's when you get it. And there are very few people who get it. You can see it in people like, say, Nelson Mandela as an example. When he came out of prison, there was somebody who had connected his spirit with his mind and body. He had somehow put something together inside of him and decided, because he had found it, he wanted everyone else to find it. And rather than forcing it down people's throats, he said, you've got the power inside you, now you find it. And for a moment, there's chaos, because it's like taking the lid off something, everything pops out. Mm-hmm. But gradually, people are beginning to see that they have been given back their power, their responsibility to make decisions for themselves. There's no big overseeing shadow that says, you can't do this and you can't do that. It's giving people freedom. The trouble is, with freedom, you get led into negative paths. Drugs are offered to you, crime is offered to you. People get carried away. It's looking for quick fixes. But we have to realise there's no quick fix. It all takes time. But it can happen in months. It may happen in a few years.
But you make it sound as, we live in the age of the instant solutions.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You buy a tape, or you do this, as you say, you do workshop thus, or book sus, or they take you for a test, and, listening to you, the next century the next millennium might be a little bit slower than we expected.
Oh, yeah. There is no quick fix, because ultimately, to get that fix, we have to still look at self. So the quick fix is look at self. Don't run away from yourself. Don't try and be on a spaceship that's leaving the planet. That's not going to work. Don't try and be at the feet of a guru, because that's not going to work either. The real guru, the inner guru, is the one that you need to touch upon. And that means that each of us has within us an individual teacher. And that inner teacher, as we call it, guides us. It tells us what to do. We call it the soul. It's the voice of the soul. But we have feelings, but we question the feelings. We doubt the feelings.
How can I first learn to listen to that inner guidance, and secondly do something about it? Like you said before, you're kind of a clairvoyant in the sense that you see things, but you are not predicting the future, but you are pointing to people in individual sessions or group work, right, how to learn themselves to steer away from what sometimes seems inevitable. My father was a drunk, my mother was a drunk, why would I be drunk?
Right, yeah. And the way to do that, first, is to see yourself as individual and see that right at this moment in the now, everything is perfect. And fear belongs to the past, or is a concern about the future. But it isn't happening right at this moment. At this moment, there is a center point, love, which is us. And what we have to realise is that the program that is inside us, whether it came from our parents, teachers, politicians, has been placed there. And we have to say, well, we no longer wish to adhere to the message that it's given us. And we listen to a new message, and that message comes within us. It's always been there. When we were young, we were told, listen to your conscience. But how many people listen?
Well, as defined by the church, for instance.
Well, yeah, possibly the church. But to me, it was my parents. Well, not parents. I was brought up in a children's home. But they used to say to me, listen to your conscience. And I didn't know what they were talking about, because when they were telling me one thing, I could see something else going on behind them. So I can often see people's motives. But what it taught me was that they were also learning. We're all learning. Every one of us is learning. I don't think there was anyone down here on this planet who has got it. We're still learning. And the best way to learn is by this inner trusting. The people that I've met who I would say are closer to having it, listen to this inner voice. Don't get a feeling to do anything, they'll do it. And it doesn't mean go off and do anything crazy. It isn't a voice inside their head, but it is a feeling inside their heart. Mm-hmm. And we all have them. Tomorrow morning, when you get up in the morning, you'll get feelings to do things. And it may be to make a phone call. It may mean to take charge of something. It could be cancel something. But if you do it as you get the feeling, and be willing to take the consequences if there's any backlash or feedback, then suddenly you start to solve all the problems in your life. You see, sometimes it falls into the middle of a spider's web, and we've got to get out. Now, you can't just be plucked out, because it's a bit gooey in there. So you have to come out strand by strand. So you go back down the path upon which you walked into the webbing, and then you turn yourself around and you walk back out again. And all of us can do that. We don't have to be stuck. We don't have to suffer in this way. We can change it, but it does mean taking action. And we are all worthy, and we've got to accept our worthiness.
Now, you, apart from the theory, have some exercises, practices to make this happen.
Right.
One we briefly touched upon is you practice Tai Chi and Qigong.
Right.
Qigong is more of an energy than
Qigong, in a sense, with Qigong, you can direct it into the organs. So we can do an exercise specifically for the kidneys, and then therefore fear. We can do an exercise for the liver, therefore anger. We can do exercises for the lungs, therefore grief. Problems with your mother, we can do exercises for the spleen, to strengthen the spleen. So we can look at different parts of the body and can put energy into those parts to help to clear any blockages which are inside the body. And so these are some of the techniques that I use, yes.
Another technique is guided visualization.
Right.
You actually have a whole set of work groups. One of it is called scenes, and you
Yes.
put them on tapes, even meditations. But guided visualization, that's. Can you briefly explain what that is?
Yes, in a way, guided visualization is probably one of the safest forms of meditation in today's understanding, really, because it takes you to a space, and because it guides you there, it also brings you back again as well. In some New Age techniques, they take you into these spaces and leave you there, and suddenly you're wandering around in what we call astral matter, when people get all sorts of strange experiences and bring the experiences back to the earth. When you are guided, you are taken to a space which is usually safe, where you can connect with other aspects of yourself, and then bring those aspects back again.
Wait a moment. We're in Holland, we're in Amsterdam, many people use drugs. There's a new thing on the market called paddo's, which is magic mushrooms.
Right.
When I listen to you, I can take those chemicals, those substances, and get it like in a, well, it's a weird space.
Right.
What you're saying, if I would be guided and not wandering around in whatever my mind brings up, dark places, nice places, it would be better to have some kind of guide.
Well, and anything that you can do with drugs, you can do with the mind. And you can do it without damaging your spiritual bodies. With drugs, what happens is like you fire off some rocket fuel, which is your own personal energy, and blast yourself through your astral body into the astral plane. And that damages the astral body. And so it takes time to heal that body. And if you do it too many times, then the damage becomes extreme. And it can take 7 years plus to repair the damage. And not trying to frighten anybody, but if you don't repair it here while you're living, then you're going to spend 7 years doing it when you die. Because that's your car, that's your vehicle for getting through the astral plane. If your car's got burst tyres and the windscreen's gone, you're not going to get through. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time repairing the damage that you've done while you're living. Now,
maybe that's true. On the other hand, we live in Holland. Most people have smoked a joint here or there.
Right.
For most people, that is their first encounter with that astral plane. They never knew. Maybe some had out-of-body experience when they're very young or floating in the room. But it sometimes is this joint or whatever. Might be a car accident too. But, you know, an experience like that, it tells them, oh, hey, there is something. And they become aware of the fact that they can actually use that.
Right.
And in the way you do it, guided visualization.
But in a sense, there is a price to pay. If you use anything which is artificial, there is something that you have to appease.
Please understand me. I'm not saying to use drugs, but for most people in Amsterdam, where we are in Holland, it is that's where they make the connection with this.
Right. But what would happen is you would go to a limited aspect of that. Yeah. It's like you don't go. You're not going to the boss. You're going somewhere else. You're hitting one of the secretaries, and they'll tell you all sorts of things to stop you getting to the boss. But if you want to go to the boss, then you've got to go direct. And you do that by listening in here, because you open yourself up and you get a direct connection, rather than, an exterior connection. Drugs always attract something towards them. If you burn marijuana and it goes off, it pours in life forms, entity forms, which very few people are able to see, but a lot of clairvoyants can see. And those life forms want payment for that trip that you're having, and they're going to want your energy, which is why in the morning you feel spaced out. You're really laid back. Ask yourself where your energy's gone. Have you been feeding something during the night? It's worth thinking about things like that, because that's what really happens. We are borrowing energy, and it's like having a treasure chest, and it's full up with jewels. But if you use all the jewels up, then there's nothing left. It's worth saving some of those jewels. When you meditate, you don't use the jewels. You can bring back jewels.
You can grow in that respect instead of...
Yes, instead of having to artificially do it, it's better to go from within. Go with your inner teacher, if you like. Go with the inner master, because that way it's safer. That way you're not going to get hooked into some astral being that wants your power, wants your energy. But you can't help it. The second you're into the drug culture, they attach to you, and it takes a while to work them off again. It's interesting watching the drug craze in the 60s in England, where when a lot of them came out of it, they got into the Indian philosophy, and so they got into vegetarianism. And really, within that 7-year period, their astral bodies became repaired. Not all of them. Some of them stayed out there, and the damage was still done, and a lot of them didn't quite make it back, mentally speaking. But a lot of them did, by getting themselves sorted out, looking at their diet and becoming more conscious of their actions, that they actually healed They're energy bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But we do damage the energy body if we take artificial substances.
What exactly is then the difference between a ritual or a guided visualization? Many rituals have that aspect of guided visualization. You work with symbols, you work with what the subconscious does, or say taking smoking a joint.
There are protective layers between each of the energy rings that surround us, and these energy rings should expand a little bit at a time. And as they expand, we pass through. And so let's say meditation, you practice and at first you don't go very high. And gradually you work your way up until eventually you can go quite high. On drugs, let's say the rings are like this, you smash through them and you go up to, say, level 22. And you're not quite prepared for that, but while you're up there you have an amazing experience. And then you come back down again and you're back in your space. But what you've done is you've left a little hole and energy leaks through. And so you get strange thought concepts, you get weird things happen in your mind. And usually the ring will seal itself again. Let's say it's one trip. Then you go through again, and suddenly the ring gets more expanded. But because you're crashing through, you damage these rings.
I don't understand that concept, but compare that with a ritual whereby you take someone, you sit them down, calm them down, meditation. The rituals have a certain progression, rites of passage.
Yes,
You also grow. You're being pushed if you are 12 or 18, whatever, in some tribe in Australia, and they say, hey, you're going to do your vision quest or your bush quest or whatever they call it. It's also a way of pushing you through to the next level.
It is, but you see, sometimes a lot of us, if we've been through various incarnations in the past, we may have already walked that path in one of our previous lives. And so it seems very familiar to us in this life. But sometimes it's like a stepping back and not a stepping forwards. In the end, you don't need ritual. In the end, you just are. It's like you can just see it. It's just there. You know it. There's an inner feeling that comes with that. The ritual is a way of getting you to it, but sometimes people get caught in the ritual. And that's the difficulty. When you're caught in ritual,
but that's what happens in churches. The form becomes more important than the content.
Yes.
Which is, what happens with most things. I mean, that's how things go. That's why I find it interesting that you go back to, say, a tradition like the Essenes, which were pre-Christian.
Right.
They were maybe comparable to the Sufis in Islam, but those were people that lived in small communities, as far as we know. Some kind of monks, but they had a very deep inner guide. They were not subject to external conditions so much as to believing in what they experienced.
And experience within. And they had a system of practices based on their vision and their understanding of how to communicate with the higher forms, but yet their rituals were very natural. Their ritual was more a communion with, as they saw it, angelic beings. So they would look at water, and if you look at water clairvoyantly, you see that it's alive. It's made up of living entities and sprites, and they would call that the angel of water. And the recognition was that if the angel of water is flowing within the rivers and seas, then the blood within us must also contain an angelic essence. Therefore, we become angelic. And that understanding of connecting with those forces made them become more angelic in themselves. It put them closer to God because they recognized the forces of God. God isn't this man upstairs, as we know, with a beard. We've got through that one now. But they saw it as a force, and they could recognize the individualization of these forces. And they would see the air. When we breathe in, this air, this is space all around us. There is something in it. Yeah, and that thing is the angel of air. And they would commune with the angel of air. So when they breathed in and took the air in, they would also take in a chi, a prana, whichever we like to call it. And they were aware of that. And so what they were doing, they were harmonizing themselves by balancing their energy bodies with the spiritual body. And you do that by observing the angel, which is active at different times of the week.
Yeah. How is it possible that those things that must have been alive and real knowledge, maybe at the time of Christ, then were taken into the church, not directly, but a little bit. We do talk about angels and energies, and we can assume that Jesus Christ was in fact a scene related. But then in 2,000 years it went down to praying here or there, or the priest telling you about,
It's all to do with people wanting power, isn't it? You know, they can research back to various times when the Bible has been reviewed, going back a few hundred years after the death of Christ, and so on, where they took out things like reincarnation. There's a saying...
At around 300 after Christ.
Yeah, 300 after Christ, yeah. But if you listen to the philosophy of some of the early saints, say St. Basil the Great, he talks in there about how we can reconnect and commune with angels and become Christ-like ourselves. Now that was obviously, he's still a sainted, so they still accept some of his philosophy. But a lot of that stuff has been tabooed, so to speak. They don't like it. And they like to put it in a kind of a dream state. Has anybody ever watched Holy Communion and saw what happens when you go for the act of Holy Communion? A huge angel comes into the building, and that angel touches everybody who's present in the church. Now that is a spiritual act. So in some of the Christian practices, there are major spiritual happenings. The great mystery is still there. Whereas in other ones, they've used it as a form of controlling people, and they control it through the philosophy. By, to them, angels are something that nobody sees, and so people stop seeing them. They're there all the time.
So why is it in our day and age that some of this old knowledge comes back? Because we find, after 2,000 years, they find, or 1,700 years, they find some old books that say, like Thomas...
the Nag Hammadi scriptures and the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes, Nag Hammadi and so on. And they find these old, not totally new sayings of Christ, but other interpretation, like the kingdom of heaven is now, only we don't see it. Well, that's not like what we learned in school, like the kingdom of heaven is if you die, you go there. No, it's now, and we have to learn to see it, because that's basically what you say. Right. The kingdom of heaven is now, it's in ourselves, and we only have to accept it.
Accept it and recognize it. And once you accept and recognize it, you start to see it. It starts to play itself out in your life. And our problem is that we've disconnected from that because of the belief systems. So if the New Age is going to do anything to us, it is to bring us back to ourselves, because that's the only way forwards. And to do that, then, in the end, there's perhaps no religion and there's no teachers. And that's why there's this immense struggle to break away at the moment. But there's no point in breaking from one, like jumping from the frying pan into the fire, which people do. They go from religion into drugs because it's the extremes. But that's not a problem, because eventually you come back to the middle. You learn to separate the two opposites and realize that they are opposite forces. But somewhere in the middle is a middle path where you can have it all. You can have the mystery. You can have the spirituality. You can put it all together and you find joy and happiness there. And that's the quest, isn't it? Do we have happiness in our lives? And if we are not happy, then we can do something about it. But to do something about it means taking action.
Mm-hmm. And I hear repeatedly that what you say basically is overcome the separation. Yes. Overcome the separation between good and bad, and left and right, and not exchange the one separation for the other. So if we are against the church, we shouldn't look into another church, but
because that separates us again. And so somehow you have to walk this middle path, and this middle path, as most people are experiencing nowadays, is a kind of lonely path, a loneness path. Most people, when they go on a spiritual path, tend to lose their friends. And they lose their friends because they suddenly realize that they have to do this alone. What is going on within you is entirely different from anyone else who's experiencing this conversation now. You're hearing different things in your mind, and they're hearing different things in their mind. We would say that each one of us has an individually designed obstacle course that stands before us. And we have to find our way over the obstacles. And so you may be working on a little bit of anger, a little bit of fear. Someone else may have a little bit more fear, a little less anger, and so on. So we all have a different combination. So if we join together, suddenly none of us can sort our stuff out. And so there is this need to sometimes pull away a little bit, to connect with the inner self. And that often means that you find it a little bit lonely for a while, until you find you. And at the moment of finding yourself, you suddenly realize your connection with everybody else. Mm-hmm. And that connection is honesty and truth.
One practical thing. If you see the energies of people related to this, you have a person, he has, as you explained, colors and stuff. Now, if there's another person, and you see the two coming together, what happens with their auras?
Right, and then they will exchange on different levels. So let's give you an example. Say you have come in and you're specifically working on fear at this moment. So you will give off a bright colour yellow, which will attract someone to you who will either have exactly the same colour, we use the word like attracts like, or you will attract to you the opposite, someone who is going to express your fear. So that will be someone who's very strong, who you become frightened of. Or you will put yourself into a position where you become frightened of that position. If you have a fear of spiders, I bet you that spiders kind of follow you around, that you always find them in the corner of your room. You experience them. And the reason is because you have to experience the fear. You can master any phobia, but what you've got to do is, instead of hating what's on the other side, you've got to love it. And that's the difference. And the same goes for people.
You have to overcome the separation.
Overcome the separation.
Basically,
Yeah, and so anything that has a dislike needs to be liked. And it's a tough one when you say to someone you've got to love a spider. But you can do it. You can do it gradually. You can learn to do it. Not necessarily through hypnosis, but learning to accept that the spider is also experiencing life. And that maybe he's only in your life because he's there to work on your fear. And once you stop fearing him, he'll go away. And that's very true. Once you change your life and you start to become stronger, your old friends fall away. Because they're only there to teach you lessons, or you're there to teach them lessons. Isn't that the old story,
love your enemy, and then the moment you love them, then you understand
they're not
yourself.
Your enemy anymore, are they?
Yeah.
No, it's the truth. Yeah, very, very true.
But so you actually say, if you are with people, there's two energy exchanges. There's an opposite.
Yes.
And there is a likeliness that joins together. And if you're both very angry, you probably get a very nice angry image.
Yes.
But so that's interesting, those two things. Now, one practical question. If you say that all of us have auras and certain exercises that should help us, what is a very simple exercise that fits with the times? I mean,
right.
is it the times of fear, or is it the times of...
Okay, yeah, we would say now is the time of fear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what to do about it?
Right, what do we do? How do we work on fear? First, understand it and take action. That's the mental image. We have to start to deal with our lives. Now, if you want to work on fear, we've got to strengthen the kidneys. And how do we strengthen the kidneys? Well, we can do two things. We can either start to nurture the kidneys, and so we can start to put your hands just on the back of the kidneys, and that helps. You can do any exercise where you want to rub the back of the kidney. Any exercise which involves bending allows energy to come into the kidney. Any exercise where you turn your waist massages the kidney as well. And so you can do exercises to strengthen the kidney. So the best exercise I know for strengthening the kidney, quietening the mind, balancing what we call the foundation, which is the kidney, is just to stand with your arms just out in front of you a little bit. Bend one knee and just very slowly turn that way. And then you come back the other way, straighten the knee, and you turn around the other side. And you keep your head centered to your torso. And just by twisting and swinging from side to side, you start to massage your kidneys. Now, I've done this in Qigong classes for quite a few years.
It feels a little bit like a Tai Chi exercise.
Yes, it does, yeah.
And that's why it's so important in Tai Chi to be really exact.
Relaxed. You just let go. The idea in Tai Chi is to let go. So you're not using your muscles anymore, you're using your inner energy. Mm-hmm. And the inner energy is stronger than physical strength. And just by letting go and by turning, you're massaging your kidneys, and you're also, by loosening up the kidney, releasing fear. Now, I've seen people do this who've had, say, a lot of grief. I knew somebody who came into the class, 2 people, and I think it was their mother had died, and they were quite grieved by it, but they still came to the Qigong class I was doing. And just by doing this, suddenly all the grief came out of them, and they felt a lot better, a lot stronger. And it's very simple. It takes maybe a few minutes.
So we don't have to give Mercedes out to people we hate or whatever.
No.
We don't need crises like Diana's, we just have to do simple exercises.
Yeah, by working and looking at the self. Okay. That's how you solve your problems. But if you don't, then you need something like that to unplug you. We need trauma to unplug us. We need experience to unplug us. And once we're unplugged and expressing love, then we don't need the lessons anymore.
Okay, let me finish with one small story, because I did once in a program about being rich.
Right.
It was a radio program, a television program. They asked me, being rich. Everybody talked about stock options and this and that. I said, no, rich. It's, you don't have to be rich. You have to feel rich. Agree? I mean, it's not important if you are rich, but if you feel rich, it's good enough.
Yes.
So what do I suggest? I said, well, I suggest that to experience that everybody walks with his feet like that towards each other, like that.
Right.
Because it opens up the... It opens you up. It makes you feel richer. So I said, well, if you feel tight, walk with your feet like that for a day. And it will help. Now, they ridiculed me because there was a serious program about tips, how to get rich, you open a shop or you buy Microsoft stock or whatever. And I came with this, what I thought was a ridiculous idea. I still think it works. But the next day I came in the office and they all came to me walking like that and said, we want more salary.
Yes, great.
So you can see how a simple exercises like that can work.
Yes.
Okay, this is Mike Robinson. He is a teacher. He actually teaches in Holland. We'll give you the phone number of his organization. He heals people in individual sessions and in groups. He has tapes out. There is a videotape called Qigong.
Yeah, Qigong or Qigong.
Qigong, wow. Qi means energy, that's energy, what I understand. With Mike Robinson. And, well, thank you for being here.
That's right.
Enjoyed it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.